Talk about your revolution. This is it. The real deal. It's the satellite revolution that's blasted an armada of hardware over our heads, a flotilla that's up there at this moment, affecting every facet of our lives. Mainly it's to do with eyes. These are a new sensory organ that we have created. Great lizardy eyes that never blink. Eyes in the sky that see everything and never lie. Home. This is us, sailing through space and time. Now imagine this is it. It's all we have. It's a dark and forbidding idea that we are alone, no orbiting companion, no helper, an insane idea. Luckily, we have such a friend. The moon was the first satellite. This powdery, reflective surface is where the satellite revolution started. First off, it was an excellent tool for night vision, and it controlled the tides. And get this, it was a natural 29-day calendar and biological clock. In short, it was a very good idea. For 1.5 million years, we stared up at it. We wanted more. And then in 1957, we got him. The Russians launched Sputnik. It was a beach ball-sized satellite that was good science, but even better propaganda. There were communists overhead. Sputnik's payload was a radio transmitter that beeped its tinny presence to a stunned world. Eisenhower could see Sputnik from the White House lawn. Sputnik did its job. It galvanized the world into action. In no time, everybody had to have satellites. Today, 24 nations around the world have their own, for communications or navigation, or just plain looking down and watching. What's a satellite? The short answer is anything in orbit round Earth. The sky's full of them right now, where they're peering down, taking our pulse, and checking up. Perhaps even more important are their jobs as messengers. They collect and transmit and transfer tons of radio wave traffic. Satellites are implied in all our TV shows, telephone calls, banking and stock market transactions. Like love, they make the world go round, even as they go round it. Some satellites sweep out segments of the Earth's surface as they soar over it. Their footprints come in all shapes and sizes. Others move across the sky at exactly Earth's speed, so it seems they hover over one spot. Today there's some 8,000 satellites up there. Most are duds left over from the toddler stage of the satellite revolution. Obsolete or busted birds, failed experiments, spectacular flameouts. These are the 600 working satellites over your head tonight. Lose a few of these, and your life would utterly change. Consider this. The Earth is a satellite around the sun. It's all about dependence. We depend on satellites almost as much as we depend on the sun. We're nothing without them. Aliens. That's a good way to think of satellites. We create them in great wombs, gingerly, as if we're giving birth to a new race of perfect creatures. They're pretty, but never for the sake of beauty alone. They have a job to do, to carry tools into space. Eyes that see, ears that hear, panels that fueled them for decades. Typically, your satellite will set you back about $500 million, take 3 years to build and launch, and give gainful employment to 100 people. Engineers, technicians, and assorted electronic hod carriers. They range widely in size, too, from as small as a hubcap to as big as a school bus. If this all looks a bit antiseptic, it is. Fixing to put up a satellite is a bit like going to the hospital. The stakes are that high.
When you think of putting a complex piece of equipment together, you're always assuming you've got a chance to fix it, maintain it, repair it, and do something to it if something is required in the future. One of the things you've got to remember with the satellite is it's going to go up there, and it's going to have to last 5 to 10 years with nobody to touch it, nobody to change its oil, nobody to refuel it. And so when you build it, design it and build it, you have to always have that in mind. It has to stay unattended in space, a very hostile environment, for 5 to 10 years. That makes it very special.
I hope they have those good parts for us today.
Now, satellite parts are hard to get. This is about the only place we can get those things these days.
Yes, indeed.
With satellites, like anything, you can buy the Cadillac or you can do something else.
Okay, Keith and I are going to get the coax.
Okay, and I've got to get some wire for the separation system. Don't forget the variant.
The variant. Yeah. And we got to have clamps. Right.
Stan, Keith, and Dick from Orlando, Florida are ham radio guys who build satellites out of nothing, out of spare parts.
Look for 20 volts, 10 to 15 amps.
These guys are living answers to the question, why spend millions for your satellite when you can do it yourself, on the cheap?
Okay, here's the clamps, tape, and coax. For the ham radio operators of the world to build a satellite, we don't have multi-million-dollar budgets that can build antennas, for example, that cost $100,000 a piece. So what we have to look for are parts that are the right size, right dimension, and fairly inexpensive. Some of the antennas on the spacecraft cost as little as $15 or $20.
Amateur radio has been bouncing signals off satellites since 1961, a mere 4 years after Sputnik. These guys have pioneered so many satellite design innovations that upmarket satellite manufacturers constantly steal their ideas. Their place is called AMSAT. Hams everywhere use their satellites for free.
AMSAT has really been the sandbox, if you will, of space technology, and particularly in space communication technology. We are a volunteer organization. We have one full-time paid person. All of the rest of us are volunteers.
It's always cheaper to make than to buy. That's the truth, whether you're ordering in dinner or making a satellite. Unlike the big boys, AMSAT's greatest cost is hitching a ride into orbit atop a rocket out of French Guiana, South America.
Our estimate is that this satellite would cost $100 million if it were provided commercially, and our actual cost, including launch, is in the area of $4 million. This is the AMSAT way of doing things. It's called KISS. Keep it simple, stupid. And we keep things as simple as absolutely possible.
You want simple? How about this? American industry is constantly turning out cheap, lightweight metal forms that resemble satellite antennas. Your mother knows them as cake pans and salad bowls. This is how knowledge advances. Doing things smarter, cheaper. And it's totally in the American grain, pushing the envelope in everything. You want to be a scientist? This is what it takes. Keeping your eyes open to every opportunity. Some explore to the ends of the earth. Dick does housewares.
Yeah, when I walk down the aisle at Kmart, my wife's always kidding me. She says there's an antenna in every pot, and that's basically true. When I walk down the aisles now, I'm looking for parts, not for things to eat or take home and play with.
Uh-huh. Yes.
Five, 4, 3, 2, 1.
For every satellite maker, this is it, the ultimate Malox moment. Sooner or later, every new satellite has to be perched on the tip of a bomb.
I think that the emotions tied up with the team that have built that satellite, managed that satellite, designed that satellite, all come to a point when you get down to the Cape for the launch. That satellite of yours, that baby, that thing you have put together all these years that have taken so many hours of your life, is out of your hands. You can't do anything about it now. You're at the mercy of somebody else. The launch vehicle, the range safety control officers, all those people now hold the future of that satellite in their hands, and all you can do is stand by and hope and keep your fingers crossed that they're going to put you into space safely in the way in which you're supposed to be and under the conditions you're supposed to be when you get there.
So the attention is building, 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 until you get down to T-0. At T-0, we in the rocket business say that something's going to happen. And the question is whether it be good or bad. When you light a rocket or a launch vehicle, it's going to move. Now the question is it going to move properly or not? Once you light off the rockets, you have no control over the vehicle. The vehicle becomes an autonomous, major explosive device.
Putting a satellite in the right orbit is no turkey shoot. It's a near impossible blend of speed, spin, gravity, and physics. You've got to make tiny adjustments that have huge implications. Rockets are among the most complex machines ever. So much to go so spectacularly wrong. Baseball 2 is an exercise in power and subtlety. Pitching and launching a satellite both demand strikes every time.
7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0.
space. That's what we call it. It's a symbol of freedom, of room to roam about, of a new, beckoning frontier. But the truth is not so lofty. There are about 8,000 satellites up there. There may be lone stars, but there will never be a lonesome satellite. If three's a crowd, get a load of this. And most of them seem to be in wildly eccentric orbits, speeding bullets that have a tendency to cross other satellite pathways. And when they do, they create a trail of satellite bits. There are accidental satellites as well. Trash or tools forgotten or lost in space will orbit indefinitely. And when we jettison a broken solar panel, it too becomes a satellite and part of our distant future.
You are essentially polluting an environment. The analogy has been made that it's like if you go camping, there's a backpacker's mentality that whatever you take into the forest with you, you bring back out. And that's become accepted. You're polluting the environment if you leave things in the forest. You're also polluting the environment in space if you leave things in space.
Orbital debris, a lot of people call it different things. We give it that name because it sounds a little professional. It's actually space junk. And when you're up there trying to work and operate in space and our expensive satellites, there it is, just waiting for its chance to hit us.
Littering in space is no joke. When everything out there is moving at 18,000 miles per hour, heck, a solar collector's no match for a wingnut. The threat of space impact is so real that protective strategies must be considered carefully. And this is where that happens. The Hypervelocity Impact Lab at Houston's NASA Space Center. This is the vacuum chamber where satellite skins and honeycombs are tested. The drill is to seal them in a space-like environment and fire high-speed BBs at them. See, it's not size alone that counts. Force, as our high school teachers told us, is the product of size and speed. So something small moving very fast can lay a real lick on the toughest of satellites. A BB traveling 15,000 miles per hour could easily take out a satellite or astronaut. Firing the gun is a dry run for something nobody wants to happen, but everybody expects. This is the machine that stands between satellites and doomsday. The craters made by orbital collisions release a lot of energy. So much that the power instantly vaporizes, liquefies whatever surface it hits. So it can study this effect, science slows down and imagines such collisions as if they were not solid hitting solid, but solid hitting water. These are the splashes no one wants to witness outside the lab. And yet sooner or later, this will happen. This is a picture of things to come. Satellites are not only a threat to other satellites, they can and do fall. The trick behind keeping a satellite up there is as old as Isaac Newton. Get something, anything, going fast enough so its speed to escape Earth exactly balances the tug of gravity, and you've got a satellite. Round and round it'll go forever, unless it comes in contact with too much Earth atmosphere. Even the thinnest of atmosphere, under 100 miles up, can slow down and degrade an orbit. Remember Skylab? It was the first American space platform, bigger than the shuttle and capable of housing all manner of astronauts in their experiments. Gradually, over several years, Earth's atmosphere got to Skylab, slowing it down, lowering its orbit, creating more and more friction and drag. In 1978, it came to a spectacular end one fiery night over Western Australia.
We raced out here, and when we got out here, we saw the first lot going out over this direction here. There seemed to be dozens of pieces, and all the while this was going on, there was a continual run of sonic booms without stopping, but every now and again there'd be a particularly loud one that'd shake everything around you.
Fortunately, it descended on an area sparsely populated, but it could well have come down over Denver. And there's more where it came from. No one can say today just when and where they'll come down, or how much will disintegrate on re-entry and how much will reach your roof. But they will be arriving with regularity over the next few decades. Pieces of old satellites coming home with a bang.
Satellites are almost like a set of eyes, but these eyes could see in places where the human eye can't see.
If I go to a medical doctor and he checks my chest with an X-ray machine, that is remote sensing. If we have a satellite that looks toward the Earth, takes a picture, and we interpret this picture, that is remote sensing.
We have now got satellites which in effect take television pictures. We can have photographs on the president's desk in 90 minutes of Afghanistan or Yugoslavia or whatever.
So it's come to this. Eyes in the sky are no longer theory. They're there. Once your satellite's in orbit, it's a space platform, off which the best thing you can do is hang eyes. There's nothing they can't see as they swoop about over the turning Earth. These views are beautiful, yes, but that's hardly the point. Mainly, they can tell us everything we need to know about the status of and prospects for the planet. They raise questions, and more important, suggest answers. When scientists pry into earthly business like this, it's called Earth observation. Anybody else tries it, and it's spying.
Measuring where things are is important because it's basically how you make maps. The easiest way to make a map is take a picture of the ground from outer space. On the average, the Earth is about 40% cloud cover, and we have very little remote sensing data from those areas, and I think radar images are going to fix that.
Satellites see in two ways. Some work like a camera. They use lenses to capture light reflected off the globe. But a second type is far more penetrating. It uses antennas to capture a radio image of Earth. It's called radar.
Imaging radar is basically a camera that, instead of using light waves like thematic mapper or most cameras do, uses radar waves. They can take pictures of ocean waves. They can see ships on the surface of the ocean and ship wakes. It's like magic. You know, you look at old Star Trek episodes and the Enterprise goes into orbit around a planet, it's full of clouds, or maybe on the dark side, and Spock says, Captain, sensors indicate that there's cities down there, civilization, road network, and so on. You say, how the heck can he do that? Advanced sensors like radar images are able to do really an enormous number of things. You don't have to worry about where the sun is going to be. You don't have to worry about whether it's cloudy. You can always get the picture day or night and in any weather.
Clouds always defeat the light-sensitive camera, but radar waves are persistent. The most solid things below, rocks, water, reflect the strongest signal back to the spacecraft, and so appear black on the picture. Two satellite radars looking at the same spot, linked by computer, allow us to create exact 3D maps of any place on the globe. Using them, you can fly anywhere, from the safety of the television screen in your den. The world has never been so knowable. Radar can also profile the exact surface height of the seas, which vary in tiny ways following the geography and gravitational pull of the ocean bottom. Bingo! 3D bottom maps without once having to get your feet wet. By far, the most startling commodity that satellites deal in is time. Satellites are patient. They're up there for the long haul, which means they can give us sharp focus, contrasty views of the Earth over time. Change detection, they call it. It tells us how the Earth's working. While we sleep, people like this are interpreting satellite pictures. Satellites send back streams of data, zeros and ones, which are converted by computers into readable images. At this stage, the photos can also be colored to highlight areas of special interest. Water or vegetation or industry or farms, whatever you're looking for, these guys can make it jump out of the frame. Still, you need a raft of specialists. Geologists, hydrologists, oil and rock and soil people. People who've spent a lifetime comparing high-altitude images with reality on the ground. Interpretation is everything.
The satellites don't tell you anything. You have to have expertise. That's the nature of our business, is translating that raw data that we receive from satellites into solutions for day-to-day practical problems.
Consider the Great Flood of 1993, an almost biblical plague swamping 200,000 square miles centered on the confluence of the Missouri and the Mississippi. From May to July, these normally wide rivers went ballistic, blowing out levees and dams, washing out farmsteads and lives. The area affected was so big that only a satellite could fully comprehend it. Noah should have been so lucky.
Part of the reason that satellites are so effective is because they take such a big picture. Now look at 110 miles or 150 miles by 150 miles. That's a big area all at once. So it's a much more efficient way of mapping large areas.
That's the great payoff of remote sensing. The new maps will help lessen the consequences of future floods, Even now, they're bringing together lots of people to decide where we build, what we zone for, and how to survive the water next time.
It's nice to see technology actually saving money and making things more efficient.
Archaeology is something we think of as firmly rooted on the ground. That's why it's a hoot to see how much satellites have changed it, because the big picture is seldom visible down here. This all started during World War I in England, when fighter pilots could see far more than people on the ground. They noticed the outlines of Roman villas and wheat fields that seemed invisible to farmers on foot. If a box camera and an old biplane could rewrite the history of Britain, imagine what the satellite eye could do. Pilots could find new sites in known terrain, but satellites vastly extended the reach of archaeology into places almost inaccessible before. This is all that remains of one of the world's great civilizations, the Maya. These are the sites that are much easier to see from 100 miles up than from 100 yards away on the ground. For hundreds of years, huge populations lived here in a very high style. And then something went wrong. Within a century of their peak, they were gone. The architects of these magnificent temples went belly up. Why? The answer to that one has bedeviled archaeology for decades. What happened may have to do with the loss of the forest that nourished them, a catastrophe that could be happening again. All over the tropics, the Earth supports great oxygen-generating stands of primeval rainforest, and we're doing our best to get rid of them. Every day we clear-cut 180 square miles of virgin forest. You do the math. It's old, dreary news. But this is where it gets new. A picture's worth 1,000 words, but a satellite photo's worth 1,000,000 trees. Clear-cut timber is plain to see from above. Almost daily, you can watch the pink devastation creep into the photos like a cancer.
So you think we'll see a time when people who aren't on a big, fat budget can use remote sensing and conservation or archaeology, like in a place in Guatemala?
I think you're going to see with the light satellites and the satellites of the future.
These men are using satellites to watch over the forest past and present. Jim Nations of Conservation International and Tom Seaver of NASA.
Everybody having access to the technology.
They've been on a 10-year journey to study the decline of the forest from space.
We've been seeing, since we started this project in 1987, accelerating deforestation. We see new roads being built, and along those roads, deforestation taking place adjacent and then moving outward.
Armed with satellite pictures, Seaver and Nations have become watchdogs, keeping track of illegal and renegade clearings that pop out of their film. It's undeniable and persuasive evidence.
A year ago, and he cut this in March and burned it in April. He planted rice here in the foreground first, and now he's turned it into a cattle pasture. When he harvests the corn on that back plot back there, then he's going to turn that into pasture as well. So it's the same process of taking a tropical forest, clearing it out and getting 1 or 2 crops of food out of it, and then turning the thing into a giant cattle pasture for beef cattle.
I think I see it here. If he was burning, that would be, here is Tikal.
Yeah. The use of satellites in conservation is what we call the wow factor. You pull out a satellite image and you look at what you're losing, where roads are going in, and what's happening to the tropical forest. You can show that to a politician, the president of Guatemala, for example, and you go, wow, I didn't realize that this was happening. We have to do something about that. Made this from a satellite image, and he later told me that you unrolled this image and saw that frontier between Guatemala, which is all forested, and Mexico, which is all...
A visual aid. That's what the satellite was to Vincent Cerezo, the former president of Guatemala, and he changed the law of the land.
And Mexico. And I am not going to forget when the people arrived to my office and showed me the picture of the satellite, because I was astonished, and because I understood pretty well what's going on, and that we should do something to avoid the things happen in the border of Mexico. Because the difference between the forest, no forest in Mexico, and the forest in Guatemala, make me feel that maybe could be one of the most important things to do in my presidency.
Along the border with Mexico, the satellite has as yet had little effect on the land. But it stands in stark contrast to this, the wilderness that President Cerezo created. This is the Maya Biosphere Reserve, the largest protected tropical rainforest in Central America and the direct result of Eyes in the Sky. Coincidentally, this is also the environment once transformed by the Maya, people who made it great and let it wither. Only God can make a tree, the man said, but we're aces at chopping them down. Fortunately, there's one significant difference between the Maya and us. We make satellites.
There is a definite connection between the ancient Maya and the contemporary people of today. I often wonder if they had satellite imagery, could they have seen the patterns before them, and with their intelligence, would they have started to make modifications to their behavior? I think that's why we're so fortunate we have this imagery at our disposal. We can see what's going on, unlike the Maya.
What more can you say in the face of evidence like this? The end of our oxygen engine? Our shrinking planet? You do the math. At heart, we're all data points, glued by gravity alone to the surface of a great globe. And hey, it's a jungle out there, and a mountaintop, and a desert. You can get lost unless you know exactly, precisely where you are. Now there's one surefire way to do that: GPS. A satellite system based in Colorado.
Pre-pass, the coordinate check is 1-H, step 2. Step 3, this is an active support for satellite vehicle number 17. Primary.
This looks like a drill, but it ain't. It's a normal day, time to juggle the satellites sailing into view over North America.
GPS stands for a Global Positioning System. It is a space-based radio navigation system consisting of 24 satellites. They orbit at 10,900 nautical miles, and they transmit a signal to the users which allows them to determine their precise location on the surface of the Earth 24 hours a day, all weather.
Your GPS satellite is constantly sending down latitude and longitude and altitude info to the people holding GPS receivers. It was developed by the military as an aid to warriors and their handlers. In combination, its signals are manipulated by a chip in the receiver, which always translates to a specific location on the surface of the globe. No one ever has to be lost again. For generals, this is candy. It means the brass hats can know exactly where each of his soldiers and planes and boats is at every moment. They can sit in their bunkers and fight wars like they're playing chess. But ordinary mortals can step up to this trough too. The constellation of 24 GPS satellites can also be used by us. Airlines are looking to GPS for navigation and guidance, and the newest wrinkle is that passengers too have become honorary co-pilots, monitoring the progress of their trips along with the flight crew. And that's not all. Satellite technology's on such a roll it's popping up everywhere. Because today's cities are so dense and confusing, GPS maps are perfect for dispatching and tracking police cars, fire engines, and ambulances. For the rest of us who have trouble folding maps, never mind reading them, GPS is a miracle. Renting a car will never be the same. A computer on board is stored with a full spectrum of local destinations, corporate and personal, serious and silly. Choose one and the digital map selects the nearest attraction and calculates the most efficient route.
Please proceed to the highlighted route.
As if this weren't enough, GPS then rides shotgun, nudging you all the way.
Right turn ahead. Slight left turn ahead. Right turn ahead. Destination ahead.
Navigating a highway is one thing. Navigating at sea is a different kettle of fish. Mainly because the road never stays still. It's complicated by wind and tides and rogue currents. In combination, they can make a dog's breakfast out of knowing where you are. But position is never a problem for GPS. The system has a long memory for things that go bump in the night. Reefs, sandbars, wrecks, and it's a whiz at finding capes and jetties, seacoasts and safe havens. Mariners are always thinking ahead to avoid the embarrassment of being surprised by geography. For Charter Captain Anthony Rizzo and his fishing boat, The Natural, GPS is even more. It's a hook with a big fat night crawler.
Well, GPS is made using a boat and fishing more efficient right across the spectrum. We are able to save fuel because we don't meander around. We know exactly where to go. We can catch more fish by being able to go back to the same exact locations time and again. And ultimately, it makes it much more easy for someone to get from point A to point B out on the water, where years ago you had to be an excellent seaman to do some of the things that now anyone that can function a GPS machine can do.
This is not just fun, a day out. Fishing is business. And like any business, it depends on the efficient use of information. In this case, data on where the fish are, or were. Whenever they find a productive spot, they record its GPS position and store it in the computer. Next day, the autopilot calculates the fastest route back to the fish, allowing for tide and wind shifts.
If we had no GPS, I'd have to go back to school and learn all the things that seamen just 15, 20 years ago had to know in order to go from place to place and do the calculations by hand for drift and for compass headings, how far the distance is and how the effects of wind and tide were going to take place on you. Now, you know, it's good to know those things, and I have a working knowledge of them, but from not using them because of relying on GPS, you know, there's just really hardly ever a need for it.
The largest creatures on Earth, blue whales. So large you can see them from space. But most of their life is a complete cipher to us. If we're ever going to understand our oceans and our world, whales are the key. These are a new generation of hunters who chase whales not for their blubber and ambergris, but for their secrets. And this is how they do it, by putting a satellite radio tag on a whale's back. Barbara Lagerquist and Bruce Mate of Oregon State University are reinventing the wildlife biology of whales using satellites.
Satellites have totally changed the way in which we can look at whales. In the past, we've depended exclusively on our eyes, and the animals are only at the surface 5% of the time. From that 5% of the time, which is basically coming up to breathe, we've tried to interpret their entire lifestyle. We've only done studies where it's been convenient for people, and now with satellites, we can put our eyes and ears, so to speak, on the animal. It can describe for us what it's doing, where it's going, in places sometimes that we couldn't even reach.
Probably go out to Santa Rosa today.
Blue whale migration has been studied for over a century, but these are the first people to be able to track them 24 hours a day in any weather. It's all because they're within view of Argos, the satellite program that, among other things, tracks tagged whales from above.
Okay, we've got two basic kinds of tags we're using. This is a sensor tag, and it measures the duration and depth of every dive. And at this end we have a vocalization sensor, and it will tell when whales vocalize and how deep they are at the time they do that. When the whale surfaces, this little stub here senses the surfacing, sends an Argos message up through this antenna to the satellite, and then the satellite links the information back down to an Earth station, and we recover it with a small PC and modem. We can do that by cellular phone right here on the boat. We have a second kind of tag which provides information about locations only. It has the same kind of Argos antenna and saltwater switch sensor, but it's quite a bit smaller, and this will provide a lot longer period of information just basically about whale movements. We use satellites all the time now in our work. We use a GPS on board both vessels in order to know where we are and guide each other. We use the Argos system for tracking whales. We have actually used satellite communications for voice communications and fax communications about weather. We monitor from our lab what the sea surface temperatures are so we can plot the animal's movements in relation to its environment. So satellites are important to us in all phases.
This is a satellite uplink receiver. It'll pick up the ultra-high frequency radio signals from our tags. It just issues a signal like that. That is a satellite signal. It was a very short signal, so it's probably from one of our location-only tags, or ST10s, which are only transmitting 64 bits of data, as opposed to the ST6s. There, that's the ST6.
That's the way we just tagged.
Much longer signal because it's transmitting 256 bits of data to the satellite.
What Barbara said had to do with the two types of tags and the signals they transmit. The short ones are location only. The switch on the tag senses the absence of salt water every time the whale surfaces and sends the signal up above. The long beeps are data on whale song, whenever they sing and where and at what depth they do it. It's a wonderful duet, satellite and computer. It amounts to a whale filofax, which the researchers can check whenever they're feeling curious about their creatures.
There it goes.
Logged into TimeNet, 2316.
So you do calm?
Yeah.
For the whales, all this technology seems little more than a nautical crib monitor. But what a crib. And like good parents everywhere, the researchers would rather be with their kids. The only question here is, who exactly is the parent and who the child?
RV Seal, RV Seal, RV Seal. This is Angela C. Beagle with Charlie Uniform 2532. Do you copy on 72, Greg, over?
Beagle, the Seal, Whiskey Bravo Sierra 9227. Yeah, go ahead, Barb.
Hi, just want to give you guys a call, let you know we've got out to the area. We've spotted our first pod of whales, and our position, if you want it, is currently 34 degrees, 10 minutes north, 120 degrees, 02 minutes west. Over.
Okay, Romeo, that looks like we're just about 2 miles from you. We'll head over your direction then.
Plainly, the whales hold the upper hand here, and yet they've never turned on the scientists. They more than tolerate our presence, almost cooperating with us to illuminate their world.
There's PTT 843 that went on at 2101 GMT on the 19th. That's 201.
Barbara records the whale's initial location. From now on, the satellite will trace its whereabouts every time it surfaces for the next 4 months. Is it possible to learn too much about whales? Probably not. When we discover their pathways and hangouts and feeding grounds and map them, we can more confidently stay out of their way so they can thrive. But there's more. They're our ambassadors to the real secrets of the deep. To us, the ocean is marine science. To them, it's home.
I think that the kind of technology we have now is the first time we've been able to get a real view of what the lives of whales are, told from the whale's perspective. We can let whales roam the seas over complete ocean basins and learn what they do to make a living and what counts for them.